Welcome to Mac Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm Barry Ellis, board chair here at the MAC. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Remax Choice Properties, the Gone team.
Thank you, Barry, and welcome everyone to Mac Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the MAC as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. So, Barry, what sort of creative things have you been doing this week?
Well, in preparation for our guest this week, I think last time we spoke, I talked about making a Kentucky Derby pie just because someone had interested me in that. But this time, since we have a Louisiana artist that's coming to the MAC and have his wonderful artwork that's here, was tasked with making, this time, a crawfish pie or mini crawfish pies for appetizers, and then also king cakes out of season, but this time I'm going to make them as Rodrigue cakes, I guess. So following the blue dog color, the red dog color, and the yellow dog color. So that way I'm kind of cheating a little bit and not doing the king cake for exactly the Mardi Gras colors there.
Okay, so that way you keep your Cajun orthodoxy straight, right?
Yes.
You do that well. Well, I have to also note that I have not gotten my Kentucky Derby pie yet, so I hope you're going to save me a slice, please.
It actually came out really well, so yes, I'll get you
that's
some.
Nice to know, but I haven't gotten mine yet, so I'll be waiting for that very soon. Well, let's go ahead and introduce today's guest. As you were mentioning, we have a Louisiana theme here. Our guest is Wendy Rodrigue, founder of the Life and Legacy Foundation and Art Tour. The foundation is devoted to deepening our knowledge and appreciation for the life and art of her late husband, George Rodrigue. The Life and Legacy Foundation is currently sponsoring an exhibit at Mont Haven called The River is the Road, the paintings of George Rodrigue. We are thrilled she is here today to discuss the legacy of George Rodrigue. Wendy Rodrigue, welcome to Mac Talk.
Thank you.
Let me just get started. Tell us, who's George Rodrigue and why is he considered such an important American artist?
George Rodrigue is one of America's most important modernist painters. But he also did amazing sculptures, such as an amazing piece that is featured here at your beautiful museum out front. But he is considered, I think, to be one of America's most important for several reasons. One, he grew out of a region. He really is a regional surrealist type painter who tried to paint not so much what Louisiana or the South, to speak more broadly, looks like, but more what it feels like. And that is where his work grew out of. And he became very well known for painting the Cajuns and their legends and stories, and painting them in such a way that had never been done before, and painting the land in such a way that had never been done before. George transformed American landscape painting, and that is very evident in the show here. And then, of course, he became extremely famous for his Blue Dog series, which really catapulted him to worldwide fame. Later.
You touched upon this a little bit, but let me ask you, how would you describe his style? I understand he was a fan of Salvador Dali, and how would you describe him?
It was interesting because George really did not like the question, what kind of painter are you?
Right.
And he also shied away from the question, what artists influenced you? But when pushed on either of those, as far as the artists influencing, the only one he would ever say was Dali, because he said Dali had great ideas. As far as the type of artist, I heard him describe himself as a naive surrealist. I heard him talk a little bit about pop, but very little. Mostly other people referred to him as pop. He did not think of himself in that way. And most often, particularly later in life, I heard him describe himself as an abstract artist. That is really how he considered himself most, was abstract.
Okay. My one of the best answers I ever got from, what is your style? How do you consider that? Came from the opera soprano Renee Fleming. I asked her that once, and she said, versatility is my style.
That's nice.
And I think that a lot of really great artists you can say that about in one way or another. Well, I wanted to maybe get you to expand a little bit on landscape, because I think the landscape paintings are the ones that hit me the most. When I was a kid, my dad entered into Tulane to get his doctorate in history. And so we moved from upstate New York to New Orleans. And at the time, I was like maybe 7 years old. And I found that a little upsetting at first, because I was thinking, well, how is Santa going to land his sleigh on our rooftops now? Because we would always have, 2 feet of snow on Christmas, and in New Orleans, there's no snow. But the first works by George Rodrigue that really hit me were the landscapes. Mm-hmm. And I think it hit me on a more of a subconscious or visceral level, because there was something about the trees and something about the sky that I saw that just brought something back. I haven't lived in New Orleans since I was probably 10 years old, but it brought something rushing back to me on a very subconscious, very, very primal, visceral level. And he captured something. It was maybe more psychological. I don't know. But could you tell me a little bit about his landscapes? Because they do strike me as being truly unique and original.
Well, thank you. For one thing, I really appreciate that you appreciate them. The very first museum exhibition that George ever had was at the old state capitol in Baton Rouge, and it was nothing but landscapes. That's all he painted when he returned from art school the first 3 years. Nothing but, as he described it, tree, ground, and sky. And it was infinite what those combinations could be. And when a reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate came to review the show, her name was Ann Price. He made me memorize it because she reviewed the show. This was in 1971. And the headline read, "Painter makes Bayou Country dreary, monotonous place." Uh-huh. And it just got worse from there. And George, of course, was devastated and mad also, because she didn't understand what he was trying to do. So what was he trying to do?
And how old would he have been about that time? Do you know?
Oh, he would have been 24.
So he was really just arriving on the scene.
Yeah, I'm sorry, not 24. I'm thinking of my own age. He was born in 1944. Okay. So he would have been 27.
Okay. Yeah. Still, a young artist arriving on the scene. And so that kind of a review would hurt, right? So
it did, but he said later on in life that he actually wanted to thank her if he had ever met her after he stopped hating her, because she taught him a very valuable lesson, which was to never listen to what anyone says about your art, no matter how bad and also no matter how good. But back to your question, George attended art school at the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. And on the ways home from art school, he would have to cross the country, obviously, back to New Iberia, Louisiana, where George was born and raised, the heart of Cajun country. And on those long drives across Texas, it takes a long time today, but back then it really took a long time. He had a lot of time to think about the road, think about the sky, the journey. And he visually recognized that when you cross the state line at the Sabine River, the sky changes from the big skies of Texas and gradually becomes small. And that is because in Louisiana, in much of the South, we're looking at the skies from underneath the massive oak trees. And George said, when you're standing beneath the oak tree, that's where you see the skies in the distance beneath the branches, and also with these interesting shapes through the branches. So he went to the Cabildo and the New Orleans Museum of Art to see how other artists had painted Louisiana. And what he saw there was that pretty much without exception, they had painted Louisiana in what's called a European style, which is the big, big skies and the land down low. And George said, that is not the South.
That's very classical, though, right? Very European and classical.
And it's Texas.
Yeah, and Texas, too. There you go.
But they were also all Europeans. No one from Louisiana was painting Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And so George changed American landscape painting, as I mentioned before, by doing something very simple, and that was pushing his tree to the front of his canvas, cutting it off at the top. And by doing that, the sky becomes small. And also by doing that, it is as though we have been invited in to feel Louisiana, because it's as though we are underneath the tree. And that's what creates the sky, as you beautifully described, in Rodrigue's paintings. The small sky, because the tree is cut off at the top, it also brings an opportunity for symbolism. Not only the trees symbolizing Louisiana, but also this bright light of the sky. George was descended from 4 Rodrigue brothers who walked from Canada to South Louisiana in 1755, which is the year of the expulsion of the Cajuns, of the Acadian people, called Le Grand Rangement by the British from Canada. And these 4 Rodrigue brothers walked from Canada to South Louisiana, and that history was extremely important to him. And he thought, what did they need more than anything? They needed hope. And so that bright light in the distance of particularly the early Rodrigue landscapes symbolizes that hope.
Well, that's a kind of contrast in light and shade that really sticks out. And I think is what maybe struck me, for in addition to just the trees, is just how there is this shade, and it's maybe a shade and a light that I remembered.
So you hit
but
the
it's like,
exact
but boy,
word.
but it was psychological. Because tell me a little bit about. He's not necessarily a realist painter, right? He's not trying to create a photorealism.
No, and he's not even trying to create a specific place. He's really trying to create a feeling. People would ask George all the time in his various paintings, where is that? And he'd say, that's in here. I've put my hand on my heart. And he did not paint specific places. He was not a plein air painter. He didn't set up outside and paint. He pulled elements from real life through photography, but he pieced together an imaginary world on his canvas.
And it sometimes looks like maybe he's created these things at different times and sort of maybe placed them on the canvas.
That's a beautiful observation. George very much liked to say that he wants the timing in his paintings to be ambiguous.
Okay.
Is it 1780? Is it 1880? And he does piece together things from different elements of time to help create that.
Right. I think in some ways it makes his work more powerful because it hits you on a psychological and emotional level, as opposed to just simply wowing you. You know, like maybe a Renaissance artist would just wow you with technique. You know, and that would have been really great at that time because they didn't have cameras and they didn't have video, so they need to wow you in a different way. But George Rodrigue seemed to understand that he needed to have an impact in a different way. You know, that's going to make more of an impact for the viewers of today.
I love that you use that description and that you referred to the Renaissance, because in the last year of George's life, well, throughout our time together, which was close to 25 years, I interviewed him all the time, and I wrote down everything he said. But in that last year after his cancer diagnosis, I really interviewed him a lot, and I wrote down everything. And one of the things that he said, well, he's very, very sick, and he said this in the chemo chair, that he now understands why Europe had to have the Dark Ages in order to have the Renaissance, because art goes through things that people may not understand at the time, and that it's really up to the later generations to reinterpret that and look at it in a new way and bring society forward.
We're speaking with Wendy Rodrigue. We'll be back after this important message.
The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties reminds parents to encourage your students to get involved in both art and athletics. Engaging in art as well as physical activity elevates your mood and stimulates your brain. The ability to balance creative expression with teamwork and discipline is a valuable asset in today's multifaceted world. The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties, a team built of Middle Tennessee natives and top real estate experts. For more information, visit them at www.lindyandmike.com.
We're back with Wendy Rodrigue. Tell me a little bit about, because there's so many different subjects in his artworks, tell me a little bit about the people that we see in his art. I see just a mix of, just to refer to a painting we have here, a mix of Cajuns and cowboys and Indians. Tell me a little bit about what we're seeing there.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the first 3 years that George returned from art school, he painted nothing but oak tree, ground, and sky. And the way he used to describe the shift to the people was this. He said that one day he wondered, what would a person look like who walked out from behind one of my trees?
What a great impetus for writing. I mean, like an inspiration.
Yes.
The what if of a novelist or a painter in this case.
Yes, and George did not paint interiors. He painted outside, and he thought, okay, so they're outside, they're living outside, they are primitive like the land. And in fact, George was not collected in South Louisiana until much, much later in his life. In fact, not really well until after his death. He used to say, the further I stray from home, ironically, the more people appreciate and like my paintings. Because the Cajun people, for the most part, did not like the way that he painted them. They didn't like the way that he painted them in this primitive fashion. And so what did that entail? Well, for one thing, George said, if my people are outside, then they're going to be under these trees. And the rules say that means they're in shadow. And he said, no, I don't want that. So it's another opportunity for symbolism. He paints his figures, as in the piece that you mentioned, which was a much later one. That was from the late 1980s. He developed this style I'm describing in 1971, is when it really started developing, 71, 72. And he said, my figures, I'm going to paint them all in white, with no shadow on them, because they are not lit by the sunlight. They are lit by an inner light, and they glow from the inside out with the spirit of the Cajun people or with the spirit of any culture. So, for example, the painting Indians, Cajuns, and Cowboys, which is really the one that we shaped this entire exhibition around. And I say we because I did it with my curator, who is fabulous, Dana Holland-Bikert of Memphis, as a matter of fact. And that particular painting links three cultures of the West: the Indians, the Cajuns, and the Cowboys. And each one of them glows brightly from the inside out with the spirit of their culture. The other thing that George said when he talked about the figures was that he wanted them to have the illusion that they were cut as with scissors. Now it's my turn to use my hands, out of Canada and pasted onto South Louisiana. So they very much have that illusion. And the way he did that was he would choose clusters of figures that he found interesting, oftentimes from photographs, and those early ones all from his mother's photo album of the 1920s. And then he would just paint that cluster. And then once he's got the outline of where that cluster is going to be and what shape it's going to be on his canvas, he designs the land around them from his imagination. And so that is why when you go through the galleries here, the heads of the people never touch the sky. They are literally locked into the land. They are basically one with the tree, really trapped inside the oak tree many times, or their head might be shaped with a bush around it, that sort of a thing. And that is because the culture of the Cajun people is so intertwined with the land of South Louisiana. And this gives them this cut out and pasted look.
Okay. Well, I'm surrounded by so many artists here at Monthaven. I have to ask you a geeky process question because they've planted those in my head. Okay. But did he use models or photographs for creating his figures, or did he do that from his memory, or was it a combination? How did he do it?
He did both. But for some of the most important pieces that you have in this show, one of the things I love contrasting is you have a painting from 1973 in this exhibition called John Courget's Pirogue. It's above the fireplace downstairs. Okay. And then just to the left of it is a painting that George did exactly 40 years later from 2013. It's wonderful to contrast these two pieces. And really, in my opinion, all of Rodrigue could be summed up with those two pieces.
Wow.
In fact, we did docent training here yesterday, and I spent an hour and a half in front of just those two.
Wow.
But my point is to do the painting, John Courget's Pirogue, for example. George found an interesting photograph from his mother's photo album of the 1920s. You can imagine these were tiny little photos, black and white. And he found this cluster that he thought was really cool of some family members in a pirogue, which is a Cajun boat carved out of one log. And they're sitting on the banks of the Bayou Teche. And he thought that was an interesting grouping. So what he did is he photographed that photograph for a slide. And then he put that on an overhead projector. He chose his canvas, and then he moved, the projector back and forth until it became the size that he wanted. And you can imagine how blurry this blob was up there, but it gave him that cluster. Then he traced round the cluster. Then he pulled away the overhead projector, and then he designed the land around the people. So that would be a case of using the photographs to make this design in an imaginary setting. And then as time went on later in his career, he took his own photographs and would use those. Or he would pull photographs from, well, in the case of Indians, Cajuns, and Cowboys, an old cowboy book, plus some of his own photographs. So yes, he used photographs, he combined them. But then, for example, in one of George's most famous paintings, Jolie Blanc of 1974, he completely made her up out of his mind. So.
Okay. He was that kind of an artist. We're speaking with Wendy Rodrigue. We'll be back after this important message.
The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties reminds parents to encourage your students to get involved in both art and athletics. Engaging in art as well as physical activity elevates your mood and stimulates your brain. The ability to balance creative expression with teamwork and discipline is a valuable asset in today's multifaceted world. The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties, a team built of Middle Tennessee natives and top real estate experts. For more information, visit them at www.lindyandmike.com.
We're back with Wendy Rodrigue. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the blue dog.
Yeah.
And I've seen the dog in the paintings in various forms. I think I've seen at least the shape of the animal. The shape seems to be what's perhaps really something he's trying to get across. But I've seen a white dog, and then I've seen a blue dog with red eyes, I think, and I've seen a blue dog with yellow eyes. What does the dog symbolize?
Well, the blue dog grew out of the Cajun works. There would be no blue dog without all of the things we just discussed. And to answer what it symbolizes is in one very simple phrase, anything you see in it, anything you want it to. But it grew out of a Cajun story. And before I say that, I don't want to forget to go back to a word that you mentioned earlier that is so key here. Because George said that no matter what his series, landscapes, the Cajun people, blue dogs, hurricanes, his figurative series, bodies, he had over a dozen very strong series throughout his career, several of which are represented downstairs. That primarily his style is about contrast. That was a word you used before. So I wanted to come back to that for just a minute because he spoke very strongly about that with regards to the Blue Dog series as well. And that is in terms of how he paints it. The blue dog is very static. It does not move. In fact, it's not a dog at all. It has no backside. It doesn't run or bark or chase its tail. It's not a character. It's not a cartoon. It is primarily, in terms of artistically, a shape. It is a very strong shape. And George is all about shape, design, and color, contrast. But it grew out of a Cajun story called the Loup-garou. Loup-garou literally means werewolf, but he thought of it more as a crazy wolf. When George was a little boy, his mama used to tell him, "Baby George, if you're not good today, the Loup-garou is going to eat you tonight."
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a very scary image.
It gets children to go to bed.
It is a very scary, mean, evil thing. Yes, that is how it began. And so George was painting the Cajuns and their legends and stories. And there is a whole story of why he got the idea to paint it. But in the interest of time, I'll just skip along to he decided to.
Okay.
But what does it look like? No one knows. Like the boogeyman, no one knows. So he goes through his photo files. We already know he liked to work with photographs. And he comes across some photos of a dog he had had years before. She'd been dead a long time. And her name was Tiffany. She was a little mutt. And what was key about the photograph had nothing to do with his dog. What was key, unless you want it to, because of course art is whatever we need to see in it, right? What was key was the perspective. Because when George would photograph his dog, he didn't photograph her by looking down on her. Instead, he would get down on the floor with her, or in the grass with her eye level, and photograph her head on, because photographs, as we all know, are art. Mm-hmm. And George loved symbolism. And he wanted to show in his photograph, by perspective, that his dog was just as special and just as important as him. And if you were my class right now, I would say, just like your neighbor is just as special and just as important as you. That's why I sit on the floor with the kids when they're little ones. And so he used the shape of the dog, the very strong shape that we all know, right, with the foot sticking out, to paint this loup-garou. So he's painting a scary dog that eats bad children. Okay. He's not painting a family pet. And he puts it on a tombstone out in front of a haunted house. Mm-hmm. He gives it red pupils, as you reminded me. And the blue color, the loup-garou story said nothing about blue. It was an artistic decision. Mm-hmm. The dark night sky and his painting, George thought that if he painted the dog a similar gray-blue shade on this white tombstone, that it would balance his painting. That is how that started. The paintings that we see downstairs have nothing to do with the loup-garou other than those origins. They have nothing to do with Tiffany other than those origins. Because ultimately, George invented the blue dog. It became something else. George himself said that those first paintings were unremarkable. That was the word that he used. So it's not like he painted it and went, oh, eureka, this is what I'm going to do. No, this is what happened. In 1988, he had a show in Los Angeles at a gallery called the Upstairs Gallery in Beverly Hills. It was all Cajun paintings. 5 or 6 of those were loup-garous mixed in there, because they were also Cajun paintings. And he overheard people in the show talking about these blue dogs. And the way George recalled it, he said he shook his head from side to side and he said, blue dog, what are they talking about? Because for him it was loup-garou. Mm-hmm. And when he got back to Louisiana, one night he's lying in bed soon after, and he used to put his hand up to the side of his head and spread his fingers wide and cup them. And he would turn his hand and he'd say, all of a sudden, something clicked. And he got up out of bed, he went to his studio, and he painted this gigantic dog, 7 feet tall, on a chartreuse green background, thick, goopy oil paint. And he gave it yellow eyes, and he called it loup-garou. And it was the first painting in 25 years that he had painted without a landscape in it.
Okay.
It was shocking for him. So what is it? George described it this way. He said that for 25 years he painted to preserve the past. And with the blue dog, suddenly he could comment on life today and ponder the future and truly express his feelings. George used to say that in art, the more personal you are, the better you become. Mm-hmm. The greatest thing he ever did was paint the blue dog because it allowed him to express himself personally in such a way that he had felt he had lost. By the 1980s, the bulk of his work was family portraiture. He became known for portraits, and he felt very much trapped by other people's wants and other people's ideas. And the blue dog helped him explode on his canvas and in his mind. He said that the dog is looking at us for answers. Answers to questions like, why am I here? Where am I going? And what does it all mean? And that we're looking back for the same answers. And because those are the questions humankind has asked from the beginning of humankind, right. It's mystery. And all great art retains mystery.
Okay, it sounds very liberating for him.
It really was. And it was hated. I mean, everyone hated the blue dog. It was shocking when I go back in time, and I'm actually this evening, I think I'm going to share that particular story, not the one I just shared with you here, but my first encounter with it and the story of how disliked it was and how George pursued it anyway, because it was so liberating for him.
Right. Well, you mentioned the wonderful show that we have here, which is expertly curated. It's called The River is the Road. And when I think of Louisiana, I think of water. Of course, there's the Mississippi, there's Lake Pontchartrain, there's the Gulf of Mexico. I moved to New Orleans in August 1969. Yeah. So I got there just in time for Hurricane Camille. So I think of water and when I think of Louisiana. And so tell me the import of that title of the show, because it must be very meaningful.
It's very meaningful. And to give you an idea of how meaningful it was for George, there are 45 years worth of paintings in this show that all fit that theme. Because for the Cajuns, at the basic root of this, right, the river is the road. Mm-hmm. So yes. People would often ask George when they'd look at his paintings, George, is that a river or is that a road? And he used to always answer that by saying, it doesn't matter, because for the Cajuns, the river is the road. But much more vast than that is that the river, or is it a road, is part of the journey. Mm-hmm. George's journey, your journey, mine, all of our journeys. The journey of life, the twists and turns. And at the end of that light, in every Rodrigue painting, right, we end underneath the oak tree with that bright light in the distance, that hope. Mm-hmm. So it is a metaphor for the journey of life. And I love how George did that throughout 45 years. There are many things that tie Rodrigue paintings together through 45 years. And I love a show like this too, because without having a full retrospective, which we've done those, in order to do it properly, it takes over 200 works to really show it. But yet you can have a smaller show like this with 45 paintings that still shows the development. It does show how he got from one place to the other. It does show how his river moved and his road and his journey. And in that painting I referenced earlier, that is 40 years after John Couraget's Pirogue. It is called, well, it's named after your George Jones.
Okay.
It is called He Stopped Loving Her Today. It is my George's version of that. One of the last paintings he completed before he died. And now, in that beautiful painting, it is not a small sky beneath the tree, a small light. Rather, the entire sky has become golden at the end of that river, because George is thinking about his journey and the next adventure.
Okay. We're speaking with Wendy Rodrigue. We'll be back after this important message.
The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties reminds parents to encourage your students to get involved in both art and athletics. Engaging in art as well as physical activity elevates your mood and stimulates your brain. The ability to balance creative expression with teamwork and discipline is a valuable asset in today's multifaceted world. The Gone Group Remax Choice Properties, a team built of Middle Tennessee natives and top real estate experts. For more information, visit them at www.lindyandmike.com.
We're back with Wendy Rodrigue. I'll ask you maybe a couple more things. I appreciate your time here. The exhibit is sponsored by the Life and Legacy Foundation. I think it's important to give the foundation a little bit of attention. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Thank you for that. Yes, I established the Life and Legacy Foundation in 2017 because I believe very strongly, as did George, in active in-person engagement with storytelling and the arts. So it started with me bringing I bring about $1 million worth of paintings into schools. I just celebrated my 200th school in 11 states just 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It was a big one. And I've done close to 1,000 presentations now with students and reached about 100,000 kids, which has just been tremendous. And of course, a natural expansion of that was into museums. George and I did a lot of museum shows together. And once I could get Dana Hollenbikert, my curator, on board, boy, that was really great, because we've been doing Rodrigue shows since 2006, and she did curate your exhibition here, and as you pointed out, did a beautiful job. So whenever I do exhibitions like this, I also tie it in because of the Life and Legacy Foundation and because it's so important to me with education outreach. And I'll be doing a number of schools that were organized here at your museum on Monday and Tuesday.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I have to commend you for that and for just the whole mission of Life and Legacy Foundation. We really see outreach as important to our mission, and we are always hearing back from kids, especially the underrepresented kids that we try to reach, who say they will never look at art the same way again, and that it has introduced them and given them a different kind of meaning, which is something that I think they'll carry throughout their river of life and their journey.
I hope so.
So just one final question. Again, we're so excited that you're here and this exhibit is here. What do you hope our visitors take away from looking at this wonderful exhibit?
Well, first and foremost, I hope that everyone is inspired. I hope that everyone comes through this exhibition and is inspired on their own personal exploration of their one art, because we are all artists, right? Our greatest personal expression is our art. So I hope that occurs. On a more selfish level, I hope they come away not saying Blue Dog, but saying Rodrigue. This is not the Blue Dog exhibition. Is it full of Blue Dog paintings? Yes. How do I feel about the Blue Dog paintings? I'll tell you, I thought the paintings that George did the last year of his life were the greatest paintings of his entire career. And every one of them has a blue dog in it almost. And they are so powerful, so poignant. You have one completed one that I talked about a bit here. He stopped loving her today. And you have also the last painting unfinished on his easel in this exhibition. So I hope that people, though, will come away from this and not so much focused on the concept of Blue Dog. It's so strong, that people grasp it. But they will have more of a concept of Rodrigue. This is what George Rodrigue did. He was no more special, no more different than anybody else. He was just a person with a great imagination who was brave and explored it against all odds. And a lot of those stories are on the extended labels, so I hope your viewers will read those. And also up against quite a bit of adversity in the art world. And he persevered and he did it. So I hope that people will come away with a new appreciation for him and certainly find, as I said, inspiration in their own artistic pursuits.
Thank you, Wendy Rodrigue, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Mac Talk from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you're interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Wendy Rodrigue. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinet. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Laissez le bon temps rouler, or as they say in Louisiana, let the good times roll.